about you and me. Let's talk about bubbles in the tub. Let's talk about making love.
Hey everyone, my name is Cyn Alexander, and today we are going to be talking about how to write sex scenes. So of course I had to bring my handsome boyfriend, who is also an author. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Cartier. I've been an author for 5 years straight. My main genre is erotica, so of course, if you're talking about sex scenes, you know, I'm the man to call.
So I'm pretty much just going to be interviewing him because he is the erotic god, and I'll throw you like that. I'll throw my input in too as I see fit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start asking questions. So the first question, Bae, is how do you get descriptive with wordplay without overdoing it while writing sex scenes?
Well, it's all about the usage of vocabulary for me. You know, I think that there's a way to really put into detail and convey the emotions that you're trying to convey without having to utilize too many words in one sentence. That's one of the main things with readers that they typically try to steer away from when it especially comes to male authors, you know, doing erotica, is they don't like too many words in one sentence, you know. You want to make everything count, and for me, when I'm conveying this thing, or I'm trying to convey an emotion during the scene, you know, I want to utilize a word that I think can pinpoint exactly what I'm trying to detail, while also trying not to focus on that one particular part for too long, if that makes sense. So for me, there's a certain word that I might use, like especially, like I said before, during the action of foreplay, you know, if you're talking about kissing the woman, if you're talking about touching her in a certain spot, I think that you find that perfect word, you go off of that, you flow with that, and then you just kind of leave it alone and you continue to flow throughout that entire scene.
I think that goes for any kind of writing. Like, pretty much keeping it short, like direct, is the best approach. Keep things moving, but definitely get your point across. So, next question: good question. Is there such a thing as too many sex scenes?
Well, if you would have asked me that 4 years ago, I would have probably said no, because I was thrown right into that field of erotica without too much knowledge on what I was writing. But now I think unless there's a certain type of story you're trying to tell, the 50 Shades series, you got stuff like that, where I think that a lot of sex can be utilized in the right way. But then there's other books that I don't think even one sex scene is necessary, and if there is one sex scene, I think you could leave it right there and it tells the story without having to go too far.
I think that first of all, you want to be cognizant of what kind of book you're writing. Like he said, like if you're writing an erotica, go crazy, but you also want to make sure that the sex scenes make sense and that they move the story forward. Like if you're just throwing a sex scene in just because you think your readers want a sex scene and it doesn't really add to the story, then you probably can go without it. So make sure the sex scenes make sense. Like if it's the character's first times, or if it's like a pivotal moment in their relationship, like it just has to make sense. You know, people just be throwing sex scenes in there just because readers like that, but it doesn't mean that like it really makes sense with the story. You probably could go without it unless like it's driving the story forward. So just be aware and mindful of that. So this one I already know the answer to for you. It is, you have a playlist to write your sex scenes while you're writing sex scenes.
I have a couple of playlists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's funny because I have a playlist for each particular type of sex scene or each type of erotica that I'm trying to write. I mean, if it's an erotic thriller, you know, I might have a lot of romance or a lot of R&B rather in the playlist, but then I'm also gonna have like some heavy rap or something that details or invokes a lot of like murderous intent, just to kind of combine that mixture. But then there's also those eroticas that are simply about the romance, and there might be a little bit of, I've had books like Me and My Husband Don't Want You that became more of just not romance, but then there was a thriller aspect to it. So you might include a song or two that might detail some type of like adulterous, affair or something like that, throwing something like a Beyonce song, anything like that. But I definitely have more than one playlist, and it's fun to have a playlist, especially when you're trying to. Sometimes playlists can help you capture that emotion that you're trying to, and for whatever reason your mind just can't seem to stimulate what you're trying to say, and so you create that playlist, and before you know it, the words flow, and you'll get exactly what you're trying to go or where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I think I don't like writing to music at all. I need silence, but I think that as writers we can pull from anything, like we can pull inspiration from TV shows, from just watching people, from conversations. But music is definitely one of those things where, like, especially if you're stuck if you're not good at writing sex scenes or you're uncomfortable, I think making a sexy playlist will help you to, like, pull things from different songs that you can kind of help the writing along. I'm curious to know this one for you. How do you best set the mood for sex scenes?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, but for me in particular, it's almost like having sex in the physical. Like you literally, like I literally set the mood as if I'm gonna make love, because I'm about to make love to my laptop in a way. And I think the first way to do that is, for me, I have aromatherapy candles. Those really help cease my anxiety. I have a hard time, especially with erotica, because those things to me are the most important, or that particular genre is very important to me. So I definitely want to have something that can help cease whatever anxiety I'm dealing with. Sometimes I can stress myself into it, and she knows this, I can stress myself out thinking about a particular scene or just book or how to end it or how to start it. So setting the mood with a candle, maybe looking over a couple of sex scenes from a television standpoint, movie standpoint, some of my favorite movies, some of my favorite scenes from a particular movie, maybe reading a couple of my favorite books. Zane is one of my favorites. Zane gives me a lot of inspiration. People like that, people like Mary B. Morrison. So, really anyway, but I think listening to music especially, having a glass of wine, things like that. Things that can really help not only calm you down, but help also kind of boost you up a little bit, raise your confidence level. So, and of course, thinking about my baby, talking to my baby, thinking about our favorite moments. And she blushes a little bit.
Writers tend to, like, stress themselves out a lot. Like, I don't know what it is, but we get a lot of anxiety when we gotta write, like, a passionate scene. And when I say passionate, that could be sex, that could be murder, it could be a fight, it could be anything, someone giving labor. But I think that sometimes, like, just remove, I like to say it's a fine line, but there are a lot of times where you want to try to put yourself in your character's shoes, and there are some times where it might be easier for you to remove yourself from the scene. And I find sometimes that just, like, putting my head down and not thinking too much about it and just writing it is easier for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, just thinking back on some moments that you might have had, that definitely helps for sure. Anyways, next question. This is a good one. This is one for both of us. Do you think that men write sex scenes different than women?
Yeah, definitely.
You think
Because
so?
I think that men, and I'm not necessarily speaking for myself, even though I know when I first started my career, I prided myself on trying harder to speak from a woman's perspective when creating a sex scene, because I wanted to prove that I can do it. And oftentimes I try too much, like too hard, and it becomes very over the top. So I think that men definitely write sex scenes a little bit differently than women. I think that the passion is there, the emotion is still there, the scenery is still created in a way where you can get exactly what both genders are trying to say, but you can definitely tell when it's a man and versus a woman. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it is great to be able to read a sex scene from both genders and from the minds of both genders, even if it's two different types of points of view. But I definitely think, in not all instances, but I do think that you can get that sense as to who it is that's writing it. and what they're trying to say. I think sometimes men can be very over detailed. I think that, and that's not to say that some women can't be over detailed too, but I think that there is a sense of like men wanting to be like overly detailed, overly wordy.
I think that I don't know, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like with male authors, there's like somehow like less feeling in it sometimes. Like less emotion. And maybe I'm just speaking more to like when I write sex scenes, like my sex scenes are very like romantic and like, you know, the characters are falling in love, and I feel like you see a lot more often with male authors that like that isn't always the case. Like they could just have sex scenes of them just like with a random person, and I feel like with women they're not gonna like write those sex scenes out because like the emotion's not gonna be there.
It's similar to the physical too. You know, most men, they can, at least they, you know, we often say that we can just have sex without the emotion being involved, without there being too much of a romantic interest in the person being involved. Most men say sex is just sex, and I think that kind of also falls back on the writing too. When they create a sex scene, is that you can get that sense like that's how they think or that's how they can move. Is that sex is just sex, and sometimes sex can be just something they throw in for fun.
So next question is, do you think it's necessary to talk about inches and sizes of women's proportions?
I mean, to keep it short, to keep it sweet, I mean, I think that it's become, no pun intended, a running gag in a way to talk about size or talk about the butt area. I know for sure, but I know I've also detailed inches too, because, and here's why, because a lot of times in these books it's becoming, like I said, it's a running gag, it's a trademark. People do it because they know that it helps create that image for that scene.
Right.
And a lot of women, you know, a lot of people have conversations about these things with their homies, with their friends, you know, how big was it, you know.
We want to know.
Yeah, so I think a lot of readers want to know too.
Yeah.
You know, they want to have that idea as to what they're looking at or what they think they're looking at. And men too, you know, if you have a male reader out there, they want to know how big was her, you know. And I think that's why we typically try to make sure that's in there somewhere. It just helps create the scene.
Yeah, so here's my advice on it. I would say you could do whatever you want. I always say, like, as an author, as a creator, you can write how you want. You don't have to follow the trends. You don't have to do what's popular. I don't know. I think that writing in sizes helps with the imagery. Just like you would write, like, you know, she had brown eyes. Like, it's similar. If you're gonna write a sex scene, like, go all out. You know what I mean? Like, write a sex scene then. But again, I don't think that you have to specifically say, like, you can, there's a way to word it without saying how many inches. You know, you can say it in another way. The last question is, what advice do you have for people that don't like to or are too shy to write sex scenes?
Anyone who's nervous, I mean, I get it. You know, you might have a particular family member or friend who's reading this stuff, and you're like, oh, you know, I feel like I'm putting too much of myself out there. And I wouldn't look at it that way. I would look at it like a lot of these screenwriters and a lot of these producers or directors or whatever, you know, you want to say, a lot of them are just telling a story. You know, you're just telling a story. It's an art form. Sex, I look at sex as an art form. A very physical one, but it's an art form, and you just invoking and creating art. That's all you're doing, just telling a story. You're creating a masterpiece, and sometimes you need that last piece of the puzzle for it to be finalized, and that's probably one of the final pieces of the puzzle. If it makes sense to add it in, it can be short. Just make sure you create a lot of emotion in it. Think about some of those past instances that you had. Put those in there, use it as inspiration, and just don't look at it like you're telling your business. Just look at it like you're telling your character's business, like you're having that conversation with a friend. You're telling a story.
No, I think that's good advice, because I was like that for a long time. I don't know if you knew that. I literally, like, for like 3 or 4 books, I did not write sex scenes at all because I found out my family was reading the books. And I was like mortified. Like he said, it's an art form. Like, it's not you telling your business. I know it feels like that, but like at some point you just got to get over it. If a sex scene makes sense, again, like if it doesn't make sense and it's not part of like the story, then don't worry about it too much. Don't write it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like people think they have to include sex scenes, and that's not the case. Like, you don't have to. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked everything that you saw and heard, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and we can't wait to see you for the next one.